This is The Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from Word Radio. You can listen to Word Radio anytime, anywhere on wordradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download it today. In this episode, Pennsylvania State Representative Rick Krajewski sits down with Amadee Braxton on solutions to discuss the federal efforts to block states from creating AI regulations. And author and former Radio City Rockette Jennifer Jones joined Tonya Pendleton on Reality Check to share her journey as the first African American Rockette. But first, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood of Illinois joined Solomon Jones on Wake Up With WURD.
Joining us now is Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. She represents the 14th District in Illinois, but also is the co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. Congresswoman Underwood, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure. And I guess I'm wondering about the budget that the Republicans have put forth in the House. It is a budget that would include big cuts to Medicaid, big cuts to food assistance programs, but also big tax cuts for billionaires. Feels like Robin Hood in reverse. What's going on with this budget they proposed?
So last week, House Republicans passed what I call their tax scam, which is cutting healthcare, cutting nutrition assistance programs like SNAP, all to pay for the tax cuts for the billionaires. And in Pennsylvania, all of your Republican congressmen could have voted to buck Donald Trump and their party bosses and stop this tax scam, but they all folded and they voted in support of the bill.
So when I look at this bill, I'm thinking about Medicaid, for instance. Now, it serves poor people who couldn't otherwise afford health insurance, but it also is something that a lot of rural hospital systems depend on. It feels like Republicans who represent those districts where those rural hospitals are located kind of hurting their own constituents.
They absolutely are hurting their own constituents. Nearly 1.2 million Pennsylvanians rely on the Medicaid program. That's comprehensive health care. It covers half of kids in this country. And you're right, the Medicaid program is what keeps our rural hospitals afloat. And with these types of devastating cuts to the tune of $880 billion nationwide, we know that we would see a collapse in our rural healthcare systems. Nursing homes would close, 24-hour memory care facilities would close, and it would cause real devastation in all of our communities, even if we have private health insurance through our jobs, right? The doctors we see, the hospitals we visit, all of them rely on the Medicaid program to be able to offer the care in our communities.
So then what happens? What are Democrats doing to try to address this? I know you don't have a majority in the House or the Senate. What are Democrats doing to address it?
Well, all of the Democrats voted no on the bill. So that's number one. None of us supported this tax scam. And right now we're holding Republicans like Brian Fitzpatrick in Bucks County and Ryan McKenzie in the Lehigh Valley and Rob Bresnahan and Scott Perry in Harrisburg. We're holding them accountable for taking these votes that will cut off people's health care. And as this fight goes to the Senate, we are making sure that all 100 senators understand how dangerous this bill is.
So what else can Democrats do? Because, I mean, it has passed the House. The Senate, of course, is taking it under consideration. They will probably make some changes and then they'll reconcile a bill and they'll vote on both. What else can Democrats do?
Well, at the end of the day, we know that House Republicans only care about one thing, the approval of Donald Trump. And so the way forward for all of us is for Democrats to be back in the majority. And our path to the majority runs straight through Pennsylvania. We only need to flip 3 seats next November to win back the House. And that's how we're going to be able to stop this dangerous Trump agenda, stop these tax cuts that only benefit the billionaires and the attacks on our health care, the attacks on the basic needs like food assistance and attacks on the communities that we live in.
So I think one of the reasons that Republicans won is because people looked at Democrats and said, well, there's no difference. What would be the difference in people's day-to-day lives if Democrats were to win back the majority?
Well, we heard Donald Trump say that on day one, he would take action to lower the cost of living for American families. And instead, he enthusiastically rolled out the Trump tariffs, which only served to raise costs for working families. The next thing they did was roll out this tax scam, which is going to cut off health care and make things so expensive for working families in this country. You know, their broken promises are stacking up. And I think that a lot of voters are really going to be open to hearing from Democrats in the next election, because when we had the majority, we actually passed policies to lower costs for working families, to improve infrastructure in our communities, to expand healthcare coverage for people. And the results are very clear as you look across the community. And so we don't need to relitigate the 2024 presidential election to offer voters a real choice in the upcoming congressional election, and to make sure that folks in Pennsylvania know how Representative Fitzpatrick and Representative McKenzie and Representative Bresnahan and Representative Perry really failed them, right? Pennsylvania voters are going to have a choice. And it's very clear from the votes that these 4 congressmen have taken that they are not working for the working families in Pennsylvania.
So we're talking, of course, with Congresswoman Lauren Underwood from the Democratic Party. And I guess my other question regarding what Democrats would do going forward is what is the message? What is the message that you think Democrats overall should be delivering to the American people in order to win their votes, to win back that majority? What's the message?
Well, what's clear is that people want to hear about our work to lower costs, our work to make sure that people can, buy groceries, that they can fill up their tank, that they can afford necessities like healthcare, that they can afford to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, right? Like those types of economic concerns remain. And so we need to be meeting people where they are and speaking to them like regular, normal folks, right? And making sure that they understand that they are our priority. I do think that there has been at times a disconnect where people feel like maybe Democrats care about somebody else, or they're trying to win over the votes of somebody else, or they're spending time with somebody else, or have somebody else in mind, right? And I think that as we get out in communities and really listen to our voters, we are going to be able to rebuild trust and earn their votes in the next election.
All right. That's Illinois Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. She's co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning on WURD.
You're listening to The Week on Word. Stay connected on the go with the new and improved WURD Radio app. Search WURD Radio in your app store. Stream every show with increased clarity. Easily access WURD TV, EcoWord, and Livelihood. Remember, Black Media Matters. Get the new and improved WURD Radio app today. Available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. This is The Week on Word, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on Word Radio. Make sure you look for and follow WURD Radio on social media. Up next, Pennsylvania State Representative Rick Krajewski speaking with Amadee Braxton on solutions.
Very pleased to have with me Representative Rick Krajewski of the 188th Legislative District in Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Thank you, Amadee. Good evening.
I wanted to have you on because one of the things that is hidden, I was talking earlier in the show about the big bill that was passed by the House of Representatives at the federal level. It's now going to the Senate, where it will be worked on. And, in my heart of hearts, it would be drastically changed, and we know it's going to get passed, but be drastically changed. I don't know that that's going to happen. But one of the things in that bill that's kind of a hidden thing is basically outlawing states from regulating artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And so I saw that, and that, of course, alarmed me, because anytime you outlaw the states from regulating something that's happening in their own, like here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that would affect people's lives. The states, in the case of that kind of regulation, it would be important to give us the power to do that. Just like we're prohibited from the state to, in the city of Philadelphia, to regulate, guns. These are problematic things. So then I saw in your newsletter that you were sponsoring a bill that is trying to protect Pennsylvanians from algorithmic generated rent increases. Can you explain that? Because this seems to directly relate to this issue.
Yeah, it does. And thank you for your interest in it. I'll just say as someone, and I don't know if we've spoken about this, but I do have a STEM background. I actually worked as a software engineer before I got into politics.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so I know enough about technology to know how it can be dangerous, and not regulating artificial intelligence is an extremely dangerous precedent. So I have deep concerns about that on the federal level. And as you said, we are already seeing the impacts of increased reliance on AI and algorithms here in Philadelphia in the state, particularly through its usage in rent price fixing. So what we've seen is there are these programs. One that's commonly known is RealPage, but there's these other programs and services that landlords and property managers can pay into to use. And what these services do is they use algorithms to basically calculate using tenant data, which is protected information. They use tenant data, and they basically share tenant data amongst all of the users to come up with optimal prices, rental prices. So basically figuring out, based on how much we're all charging tenants for rent, how much rent can we get away with charging based off of this algorithm. They're also used for things like rental agreements and unfair rental agreement language as well. So it's a pretty unfair business practice, because you're using information about consumers, in this case tenants, to then gouge those tenants for more money using artificial intelligence optimization. So it's a really concerning thing we're seeing happen. And so I actually was inspired by Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke, who introduced similar legislation banning the practice in Philadelphia. And given what we're seeing on the federal level, felt it was important to take on the baton and use this opportunity to regulate this statewide.
What are the other areas that you know of where AI is being used, or algorithms are being used in a detrimental way against Pennsylvanians? I know that it has been used in terms of, was it sentencing?
Yes, absolutely. So one common use that we've seen algorithms is in risk assessment tools, otherwise known as RATs, which are these tools that judicial courts use to determine the risk of a defendant. So risk of flight, risk of returning to court, et cetera, risk to the community. And so these algorithms will use sentencing data to make predictions as to the level of risk a judge would be taking if they were to allow a defendant to say be released pre-trial, released on recognizance, or some other conditions around early release. And the problem there is, as we know, our criminal legal system is racially biased. And so your algorithm is using racially biased data to make predictions about risk, which will then be racially biased. And so what you see is these tools continuously determine that people who are poor, Black, and brown are at more of a risk. So we see algorithms in that context, basically reinforcing some of the racist narratives that exist around, who is considered safe or not.
So in terms of your bill and the use of algorithms in setting rent prices, in one of the articles I read, it said that other states are also moving to do this.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're seeing increased prevalence. I mean, AI is becoming so ubiquitous. I mean, people use ChatGPT for fun, at this point. And so it's becoming a ubiquitous part of our life. And as a result, it's a technology that people will use to exploit people unless we put protections in place. And so we're seeing that increase in exploitation through these rent setting algorithms. It's not just isolated to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. It's happening across all 50 states. And so I think that's why you're starting to see states take action. Also partially because we're seeing the federal level, the federal government actually pushing for deregulation of artificial intelligence. And so I think a lot of states are realizing, we got to set some local protections here because we can't count on Congress to rein in this technology.
One last question before I let you go. We see the prevalence, maybe it's even more accurate to say the infiltration of the tech billionaire class into the Trump administration. And at the federal level, Elon Musk was in the meeting with Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, the other day in the Oval Office. He was obviously playing this huge role in Doge, cutting the federal government. And then you saw even at the inauguration of Trump, all of these tech billionaires sitting in the seats of, as his guests. Do you see that happening at a lower level in terms of like lobbying done by the tech industry in the state government?
That's a good question. We haven't seen a huge uptick yet. I think because there's been so much action on the federal level, I suspect. But I think as you start to see states take on more local policy around AI regulation, you're going to start to see the pushback in response. So I haven't seen a huge uptick yet, but I just introduced the bill yesterday, so don't let me not hold my breath. By next week, I might be getting some calls. So yeah, I think it's like an ongoing active campaign we're seeing. So I'm not sure yet.
What's the name of the bill? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's House Bill 140. We just introduced it. I am co-priming the bill with a couple of my colleagues, Representatives Schusterman, Smith-Waddell, and Pielli, who all represent Lancaster County, Chester County, and I believe Pielli is in Montgomery County. Oh, he's in Chester County as well. So it's not just a Philadelphia issue. We're seeing this show up even in suburban counties, right? That you have housing stock in Lancaster, which is more of a mid-state city. So we're seeing some statewide interest in this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll have to track the progress of this bill and have you back when it passes. We'll see what happens.
Great.
Thank you for coming on at the beginning of this holiday weekend. We really appreciate it.
You're tuned into The Week on Word.
Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit WURDradio.com. Our last conversation in this episode features author and former Radio City Rockette, Jennifer Jones, speaking with Tonya Pendleton on Reality Check.
We like to start our show with historical moments, and we have someone to introduce you to who has created a historical moment and written about it in her book, Becoming Spectacular, The Rhythm of Resilience from the First African American Rockette. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Jennifer Jones. How are you today, Jennifer?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on your show today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. So I don't think that there's anybody who doesn't know who the Rockettes are, but just in case, let's start there. Who are the Rockettes?
The Rockettes are a world-renowned dance troupe that were established in 1925 in St. Louis, Missouri by Russell Market. And his idea came based off of the Tiller Girls, which was a British dance troupe. And he thought that if he could get an American dance troupe with women who could do intricate tap routines and do eye-high kicks at the end of their performances, that it would knock the American people's socks off. And he started that in St. Louis, and now they're world-renowned at Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah, the Rockettes, we know them from their high kicks and their fabulous costumes, and of course, the spectacular Rockettes Christmas show, which happens in New York City in Radio City Music Hall. So the thing is, as fantastic as they were, it took until 1987 for someone to break the color line. And this was based on what?
Well, this was based on an antiquated thought process. When Russell decided to have this dance troupe in 1925, Black performers weren't even allowed to dance on the same stage as white performers. So it becomes from this, antiquated part of history. But that's why we have these fabulous dance troupes, Dance Theater of Harlem, Alvin Ailey. We've birthed all these Black dance troupes, which are still alive today. But you would think that in 1987, under the backdrop of New York City, which you would be so progressive, that there would be a Black dancer. But there wasn't. And I think they went on to hire me because at that point they were looking for someone to hire. The ticket sales for the Rockettes weren't doing so well. Radio City wasn't as a big money maker as it is today with the Rockettes, and they needed something to boost everything. And I think, unfortunately, they thought hiring a Black dancer was the boost. But they also did have Hazel N. Dukes from the NAACP knocking on Radio City's door year after year saying, you are not an equal opportunity employer. And I think that was also getting to them also.
Yeah, and there was some, as you mentioned, this was an antiquated policy, but there was a reason for it. There was some sense that because of the precision of the dancers, that somehow African-American dancers would change that?
Yes. Violet Holmes, who was the choreographer when I came into the line, who Russell handed the line down to, had the same thought process. And they thought that hiring one or two Black dancers on the line would lose the uniformity of the precision of the Rockettes, which was their hallmark. Russell's thought process was having 36 women dance at Radio City Music Hall. That's how many women fit across the stage. And having them look at as one dancer, and having one or two Black dancers, or even if a woman got suntanned, they were pulled from the show, would lose the uniformity of that.
That is something to consider. So you walked into this scenario, someone who grew up in New Jersey, not too far from Radio City Music Hall, grew up your life dancing, and you came to audition for the Rockettes. How did that happen? And were you aware that if you made the audition that you would be the first one, or you just thought, I want to be a Rockette?
Well, growing up, my parents were big Broadway goers. They would go see Pippin with Ben Vereen, Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar. So when The Wiz came to Broadway with the powerhouses of Stephanie Mills, Mabel King, Andre DeShields, when that came to Broadway and kid-friendly, my parents took my sister and I to see it. And I was in love with the stage, and it was so magical being transported into Oz and waiting backstage for the performers' autographs. So much so that my parents took my sister and I to see The Wiz 5 times. And I knew at that point, I wanted to be on that stage and do what they do and walk out of the backstage door. So throughout my journey and becoming a teenager and deciding what I want to do in life, I wanted to perform. So I started dancing in New York City, and the Rockette audition came up, but I was looking for my big Broadway break. And one of my friends said, Jennifer, you should go to the Rockette audition. You would be a perfect Rockette. I had no idea who they were. I did not know anything about Radio City Music Hall, but I was very green in the business. So the morning of the audition, I woke up and I decided to go, not knowing anything about them. And when I arrived at the audition at Radio City, there was a line of women wrapped around the building that knew how to do their hair, their makeup. They knew what costumes to wear for the audition. And I got on the back of the line and I thought about leaving numerous times. But there was an inner voice that almost pushed me back in the line and told me to stay. And if I did not stay on that audition line, I never would have made it to the Rockette line.
Yeah, that's a good lesson in sticking to whatever it is that moves you and going forward with it. Now, you were selected as the first African American Rockette, but as you said, you were green. And did you have any idea what that really meant once they started hitting you with all of the press requests and all these other things that they were doing to promote the fact that they had hired you?
That is such a great question, because at the ripe age of 20 years old, not knowing the history of the Rockettes and just having this love of wanting to dance and be on the stage, I did not know the magnitude of what was happening. I just knew that I wanted to be on the stage and wear the costumes and wear the lipstick, and it would take me years to learn the history of the Rockettes, what they were about, and what my place in history would be.
Jennifer, do you think that actually helped you navigate this big deal to so many other people? You knew that you were there just because you wanted to dance, but there was all these interview requests and all these things that you had to do along with preparing to be a Rockette. Do you think that your naivete kind of helped you with that?
I do, actually. There were some moments that were very difficult where I received hate mail, or ladies on the line made remarks and me knowing that they did not want me there, or even people in management pulling me aside and telling me I'm lucky to be there. So for me, just having the pureness and the innocence of just wanting to be on a stage and perform, I do believe that being naive was somewhat helpful.
Now, you made your debut, which I didn't know, at the 1988 Super Bowl. This is the one that was won by a black quarterback. Doug Williams was the winning quarterback for the first time in NFL history. So there really were two African Americans making history at that Super Bowl, and Chubby Checker was the performer. What was that like to make your Rockettes debut in such a huge event broadcast all over the world? Did you feel any pressure, or were you just like, I want to get these steps right and that's all I'm thinking about?
Being performing at a sports arena with timeouts and flags being thrown, and your performance gets pushed off. So by the time I was on the field and ready to perform, I was extremely nervous. But once you hear the music, once I heard the music, and once I got out on the field, it felt like home, and it felt like I was supposed to be there. And I've met Doug Williams. I go to the Commanders games all the time, and he's such a wonderful person, and I have pictures with him, and I feel so blessed to have made history with him that day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one of the things that the Rockettes do is they prepare you. Talk about the rehearsals and the preparation for being a Rockette.
Oh, they're very strenuous, especially when you're not a seasoned Rockette going into Christmas show year after year. So the first year is very difficult because you're learning maybe 7 or 8 routines and how the costume changes work, and being on your feet for 8 hours a day, dancing, learning how to fuel your body with water and food, and getting a good night's sleep. I know for me, after going into one day of rehearsal, I would go home and my kitchen would become my rehearsal studio. So I would practice all the numbers so I could get it even down better when I went back the next day. But I always wanted to be in that large rehearsal hall with mirrors floor to ceiling, with having a pianist play those melodies and just dance all day.
Now, you may think, hearing the title, because the book is called Becoming Spectacular, The Rhythm of Resilience from the First African American Rockette, that it is just about your background becoming a Rockette. But in fact, you detail a lot of things in this memoir that have to do with resilience, including being a cancer survivor. Tell us a little bit about that, because it seems like maybe the Rockette training helped you navigate that process as well, because you had some approaches to that seem as though they could have started out from the things that you were doing as a Rockette.
Absolutely. Being a Rockette really helped form how I shape my day. I love being in a routine process. I like to have things laid out so I know how to follow. So when I was diagnosed at age 50 for a routine colonoscopy, and being vegetarian at that time for 25 years, eating healthy, exercising every day, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. And since then, the routine colonoscopy has decreased, age has decreased to go to age 45. So anyone who doesn't know, or I'd like to serve this as a reminder to those who do, routine colonoscopies start at age 45 and they can be covered under insurance. They're finding colorectal cancer in younger and younger adults, and we don't know why, and especially in the African American community, which is so important that we go get screened. And there are options out there through the Colorectal Cancer Alliance and Colon Cancer Coalition where you can get free colonoscopies if you contact these groups.
Yeah, people in your book, people in your family were surprised that you were the person who came down with cancer because of the fact that you were so healthy, had healthy eating habits and all those things. Do you think that helped you overcome and do well in chemo and all those things because you were so healthy and really practiced good habits in that sense?
Well, I do have to tell you, in that sense, I was extremely ashamed when I found out I had colorectal cancer, because I was the healthy one in my family. And I didn't tell my family for a month. I kept this all to myself, and I went to go to screenings and MRIs in private. And of course, when I did tell my family afterward, they were very supportive. But I do think that having a healthy lifestyle and being active was helpful to my recovery and going through my chemotherapy treatments.
Yeah, well, Becoming Spectacular, The Rhythm of Resilience from the First African American Rockette. Her name is Jennifer Jones. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find the book wherever books are sold. And congratulations on your accomplishment. It's amazing to be talking to you. I grew up in New York City, so of course the Rockettes have a special place in my heart. And I thank you for writing this book and sharing your experience.
This is the Week on Word.
Word is for the people, by the people. When you tune in, share, or give, you're keeping a vital platform alive. Let's grow together and keep pushing the conversation forward. Support today at wordradio.com/support.
We all we got, we all we need.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com and the Word Radio app.